Namaskar girls. Today we are going to discuss about My Mother at 66, which is a beautiful poem composed by Kamala Das. Kamala Das is one of the greatest literary figures in Malayalam and also one of the stalwarts so far as Indian writing in English is concerned. This poem revolves around the theme of advancing age and the fear of loss and separation. The poet looks at her old and feeble mother, and the finality of death looms large on her mind. Looking at her old mother, she's pained and worried as she realizes that the mother may not live long. This poem is an agonizing experience and written in free verse. That is, there is no regular rhyme scheme. There is only one pause at the end, and she, the poet, possibly wants the mother's life to be a continuous one. The poet is driving back from her parents' home to Cochin on a Friday morning, Friday, weekend. And let us not ignore that the mother is a 66 years old lady, a time when everything is unpredictable. The poet noticed her mother sleeping beside her, open mouthed, and her face is as pale as that of a corpse. Here the poet has used simile. The mother's face was pale and greyish. She seemed to have lost all vitality. Such paleness, that is greyish color of the skin, is usually associated with a sick or a dead body. The poet was gripped with fear and grief as she realized that her mother was as old as she looked. The poet tried to brush aside her thoughts by looking away. She was feeling overwhelmed. She was feeling guilty that she would not be able to take care of her old mother. The trees outside seemed to be running, and the children looked joyous as they rushed out of their homes. The trees running is personification, and here we can also see a contrast. A contrast between the mother and the trees. Here, the trees and the children are symbolic of youth, vigor, vitality of life, and growth. The movement of the trees and the speeding car are reminders of the fact that time had flown by. The children probably reminded the poet of her childhood and of the time when her mother too was a young lady. The airport too was brimming with activity. After the security check, the poet once again looked back at her mother. She noticed her ashen and pale face that looked like the late winter's moon. Here too the poet has used a simile. Words like pale and wan reinforce the idea of pallor and lifelessness. Winter symbolizes death, thus the mother's face is indicative of her very frail, weak health and fast approaching death. The poet felt the dull pain gnawing within her. Let's discuss a little more about this winter moon. The poet is using this simile to compare her old mother's pale face. Just as the moon loses its brightness in the winters because it is hidden by fog and mist, similarly, the face of the poet's mother has also lost its radiance, which is misted by age. The poet remembered how often as a child, like any other child, she feared losing her mother. And this is probably what we can say is her old fear, which has resurfaced. But she was beset with sorrow and insecurity as she bid goodbye to her mother and tried to hide her fears by smiling. Let's look a little bit about this aching pain or the familiar ache of the poet. The familiar ache that the poet refers to is a reflection of her insecurity she had felt as a child about getting separated from her mother. Now, the fear of permanent separation from her old mother, owing to the latter's, that is, the mother's, impending death, has aroused the same kind of pain in her. What is this childhood fear? The poet's childhood fear was that she would lose her mother or she would get separated from her mother, which every child is scared of. As an adult, the poet tried to put on a brave front by hiding her fear behind a smile. Possibly she was also trying to convince herself that her fears were unfounded. She was also trying to hide her guilt. The guilt that she is unable to stay back, take care of her, and has to move on in life. The speaker was overtaken by a terrible numbness. Here we can say there's a kind of stoicism. The poet is accepting things because she cannot change them. And all she could say to her mother before she boarded the aircraft was, "See you soon, Amma." But what are these smiles? You will find repetition of the word smile at the end. Look, if we look at the parting words and her smile, they are actually signifying her pain and fear of losing her mother. She tries to put on a brave front, hide her fear, but at the same time, these smiles are reflection of her bidding goodbye, trying to hide her guilt, her anxiety, her fear, and at the same time, somewhere, maybe deep down, she is hopeful that she will meet her mother the next time she comes back. Thank you.